I'm going to talk about a couple of things that are related to what we did over the weekend. This last weekend, I took some of the students. Hudson was there, Catherine was there, some of the people in the last class were there. So we did a retreat, a meditation retreat, and it was really wonderful. We do this every year where we choose kind of a theme, and it involves a lot of meditation and usually some Tai Chi and other internal work. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what we did, but also like the lessons from that weekend and things that we can all take from it, even if we weren't there. So one of the things that's really nice about it is we go up to the woods. We're on Mount Baldy, and it is a really beautiful place called the Mount Baldy Zen Center. It is an old Boys Scout camp that's been retrofitted into a beautiful Zen retreat center. And there's a meditation hall and another hall where you can practice martial arts. We put these mats down, and there are these cabins that are not so bad. I feel like they're pretty good, but I get to stay in a slightly nicer cabin, so I can't complain about anything. The weather was beautiful. The food was wonderful. It was a great weekend. And the best part of retreat, I always say, is spending time with the wonderful people from the school, and you get to know each other a little bit better. But this retreat was a silent retreat. We were silent for about 24 hours from Friday night to Saturday night, and then you were allowed to talk a little bit. And lots of meditation and no required partner work. You could have done the whole thing, just meditate all weekend long. And one of the points that I made was, as you know, we're really getting to spend time with the best people in the world, the people who I love the most. One of the people on that list should be yourself. And that's really the person you were spending the most time with if you came on retreat. And retreat is a great opportunity to get back in touch with yourself. And this is really what meditation is on some level, is to be able to recognize the thoughts and emotions that you have. A goal of meditation is to be able to let go of those things and return to the breath and really be in a calm, kind of empty state of mind. So this wall scroll on the back of the dojo says Mushin, which means no mind. It's the Zen state of mind that you're trying to get into with martial arts and with meditation. And on your way there, you're going to go through lots of nonsense that your brain and your ego comes up with. Your ego does not like you being in this state because it's like ego death. Your ego is clawing for life to stop you from getting into that meditative state. So you got to just recognize your ego and, you know, let it go. Be kind to yourself sometimes. If it feels like you're fighting against it, that's kind of counterproductive. And this is some of the lesson that we learn in our physical martial arts practice as well. If it's always feeling like I'm fighting force against force, power against power, there's an easier way. So one of the easy ways, not easy at all, but one of the easier ways to get to that silent place in your meditation is to just be in silence. Silence is incredibly powerful. It is a way to overlooked tool to connect with yourself, to connect with something bigger than you, whatever you believe in, even if it's just the universe. And in silence, there is really nothing in the way. And so that's why we do this silent retreat every year, is to let go of all the junk and just be there in the present and be there with yourself. And when you're working with a partner, to be there with your partner. So in tonight's classes, we were doing a lot of work in silence to try to extend this from retreat into our practice. When we talk, it's so hard when somebody else is talking to ignore that, unless they've been talking for a long time. And sometimes I feel like people are ignoring me when I'm speaking. But I'll say, well, my experience of like listening to lectures in college was that it was very easy to ignore people. If you're trying to be silent and you're trying to let go of thoughts and you're trying to meditate, one of the hardest things to get past is somebody talking. when you're in class and you're doing partner work and you're trying to focus on the technique, of course there is use in explaining what you're doing. And communication, verbal communication, is incredibly powerful and incredibly important. And on some level, it gets in the way and it kind of covers up. It's a mask over what's really happening, right? So you're trying to, learn a technique that I'm showing you and I'm explaining all the details. And what I'm saying, the words that are coming out of my mouth can only cover maybe like 10% max. And I'd have to talk for hours to cover 10% of the details of a technique versus you watch. And of course, what I'm saying, I'm pointing out some important details, some kind of highlights of things to pay attention to. But if you're not hearing me say what to do with your feet or what to do with your thumb or all this stuff, then there's all of this that's getting missed. It's the same thing with the way that we experience each other and certainly in the way that we experience ourselves. It's so tempting to fall back on this verbal way of explaining things and these stories that we have in our head about what life is like, and our experience very often boils down to this way that we experience things through words and language. And while it's very powerful, it's also limiting. So recognize that. So part of what I'm going to talk about tonight is that the power of silence. And on retreats, we did a question and answer and kind of discussion. And one of the things that Hudson brought up was on his drive up to retreat. And it was a long drive. What was it for you? 3.5 hours. That's no joke. Plenty of time to be in silence and really gear yourself up for being on retreat. Were you listening to music?
As a musician, it was very meditative to listen to music.
Of course you were listening to music. Yes. Great. So as you mentioned, it's a lot of time to be on your own, and even listening to music, it can be meditative. I personally love driving under many conditions, but driving in silence. And you'll start to feel like you're going nuts after the first few minutes if you're used to always having music on or a podcast, or you're always talking to somebody or whatever. God forbid you're always texting while you're driving, then it's going to be even worse. But if you get used to it, driving in silence is such a joy. I mean, it is one of the best experiences you'll ever have. And it can feel in many ways just like a sitting meditation. You cannot and should not drive with your eyes closed, but the rest of it is kind of similar, right? You're in a good posture, I hope. You can focus on your breathing. One of the things that I used to do is I would drive an hour to get to my seafood school, an hour there and an hour back all the time. And sometimes I would just count my breaths. I would just drive and count my breaths, and it would be, in the thousands. And sometimes I would lose count and just start doing it all over again. But I remember this one particularly long drive to class. It was about 3 hours long because there was snow. And driving in snow can feel really nice too, because it's even more silent, but also very dangerous. You have to pay attention. So that was it. I usually drove with one of my friends, and he didn't come that night. So it was just me in the car alone for 3 hours in dead silence. And some of that I was counting my breaths, and some of that I was just like being there. And a lot of it, my mind was wandering, and I just come back to driving. And it felt really nice. The time kind of flew by. And when I got to the dojo, my sifu asked me where I had been, because I'm usually there 3 hours earlier. And I was like, I got, terrible traffic, got stuck in the snow, took me forever to get here. And he was like, oh, that sounds awful. And I said, yeah, it wasn't that bad because I liked the company. And I was talking about myself, and that, looking back on it, could be interpreted as like a real kind of egotistical thing, like I'm so great, I'm the best company. And it could have also, as soon as I said it, I thought, oh, it's kind of mean because I'm usually driving with my friend Michael, and he wasn't in the car. And it's like, what is that saying about what I think of him? But I just meant it in the moment. It was like nice. I didn't hate being by myself. And that was not a brand new experience, but relatively new for me at that point in my life. And this is one of the things that is there for us to experience in our meditation practice, especially in silence, is to really experience ourselves and to be okay with that silence. And when thoughts, sometimes painful thoughts, come up, to be with them and in the silence to be able to sometimes process them and let them go and just return back to the breath. So that was really nice. There was this, who's read the book Atomic Habits? I know you have, and nobody, you think you've read it? Something like it. Okay. This is a great book. And I have demanded today that we get copies in the dojo so that you guys can get it here too. This is a book by James Clear. It's a wonderful book on habits, probably the best that I've read. And in the book, he makes lots of wonderful points. This is a quote from him that is not from the book, but I thought it was very interesting and kind of fit well with this topic of the meditation retreat. So he says, if you're stuck on a problem, try solving it at a different level. And I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said, but imagine you're thinking about a unified country or a unified world. And the question, the problem that you are contemplating is, how can we create this unified country or this unified world? It's a very big problem. And when you start thinking about that on that scale, it seems kind of undoable, unimaginable. The things that come to mind are not really tangible. It's big ideas that are really hard to kind of put into action. But if you think, how can we create a unified neighborhood or a unified community like in the dojo, then things are a lot more tangible. It becomes a lot more manageable. This is kind of the same idea as taking a big goal and breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. But I like this idea of just shifting. And so this is what he would call zooming in, right? Zooming from the macro to the micro, from the global to the small scale, really makes things manageable. And then you could take some of the lessons or the actions from that little problem and apply them to the big problem, even if it's just simply one by one going neighborhood by neighborhood, creating a unified neighborhood or unified group of people, right? And so I thought that's kind of interesting when we think about lots of problems in life, but with the problem that is meditation, which is not really supposed to feel like a problem, but unfortunately oftentimes does. And when we're sitting to meditate and we have lots of thoughts and our mind is wandering, this meditation can feel uninspired. It can feel like a failure. If you're sitting there just thinking the whole time, you might think like, this was a bad meditation. And you can imagine if you zoom in, instead of taking it at the level of the whole meditation, let's say you were sitting there for 15 minutes like we'll do in a little bit here. And that was a bad 15 minutes. But maybe you can zoom in on one breath. And I don't even mean after the fact. I mean in the moment of your meditation. If you can zoom in on this breath, maybe the last 5 minutes or the last 10 minutes were rough. Maybe you just spent a whole lot of time thinking and stressing. And then you remember, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be meditating. So then you just zoom in on this one breath. It doesn't matter if you had 999 breaths that went by and you totally were not paying attention to them, but in this one breath, you were able to do it. That completely shifts that entire meditation, but for sure in that moment, when you're able to zoom in, then everything that happened disappears. Like it doesn't bother you, it does not, you're not stuck on it, you're not attached to it, you're in this present moment. So sometimes what we need to take is that opportunity to zoom in. And then I also thought about it, what if we take it the other direction and you zoom out? And oftentimes what is seeming like kind of a small but very immediate problem, and we're stuck on this, can disappear, or we can get some better perspective if we zoom out. So this meditation is bad, but I zoom out, and let's say that instead of just fighting to find silence in this moment, I can zoom out and just be in an entire weekend of silence. I'll tell you, if you're having a hard time, as most of us do, going from regular everyday waking consciousness, let's say that I've had a stressful day, I've been going, and then I'm like, time to sit and meditate, and it feels like you're crashing into a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. It can feel jarring, to say the least. It can feel like you're crashing into a brick wall. But if we are able to kind of wind down into it, so one of the pieces of advice I love to give to people is, if you are getting ready to meditate, you kind of have a routine that you use to get into it, right? So maybe some people like to light incense, or they like to, shower and have the same kind of winding down period that they have going to bed. You do that before meditation. And that will kind of allow your mind to settle a little bit more, so it doesn't feel like such an abrupt thing. Imagine if you have just a whole weekend, or at least a whole day, that is really dedicated to that. It's like, I'm in silence. To go from being in silence, even if it's just a car ride, to then being in meditation is not that hard to do. The transition is a lot smoother. And not to keep going back to driving, this is not a talk about driving, but living in LA, everything is about driving, really. So I used to crack myself up all the time. I would be running late to Tai Chi, and I would be like zipping around people and really trying to, not necessarily speed, but yes, speeding the whole time. And it's like I'm racing all the other cars to get there in time for Tai Chi. In Tai Chi, one of the main points of it is to relax and just be in the present. And one day I caught myself speeding to get to Tai Chi, and I didn't stop the car, but I stopped in my mind, and I laughed at myself, and I realized, like, this is really kind of ridiculous, me being in such a huff and such a rush to get to this class where I'm gonna get there and then relax. What if I just relaxed now? And from then on, every time I was driving to class, any class, I would just allow myself to just sit in the same lane and not try to race all the other cars. And that really changed my experience of driving, turned it into more of a moving meditation. And then when I arrived at the dojo, I wasn't in such a stressed place. It's like, okay, I'm here. But really, I've been here the whole drive over. You can take a vacation and turn it into a year-long vacation. I'm going to visit family and do a little mini vacation in Asia at the end of the year. And part of it is we're going to Hong Kong to visit my wife's family. Part of it is we're going to Thailand. Never been before. Very excited about the food and the beach and all of it. It's going to be great. And I've been planning this trip, and I've been planning, the itinerary, what places we're going to go to eat and which beaches we're going to go to and all that. And every time I sit down to think about it, it's like I'm there. And I'm looking forward to it, and it's beautiful, which is kind of on some level the antithesis of being in the moment. I'm not really, it's the opposite of that. But you can play with this in your life, right? You always want to have something to look forward to. And I'm not saying that you spend all day wishing that you weren't here and wishing that you were in Thailand on the beach, but in this way, we can kind of extend our experiences, right? So the best time is really leading up to vacation. The worst time is the last day of vacation, because even though you're sitting there on the beach right now, the next day you're on the plane heading back to this terrible city that we live in where it's warm all the time and sunny, but your job, whatever it is that you're not looking forward to. And that's funny because in that moment, of course, we're like on the beach. It's beautiful. This is it. I'm here. I've got this drink in my hand. The weather is so nice, but you're thinking about how you're about to go back and have to go to work the next day. So that's kind of how we bend time and kind of extend our experiences. This is another thing that Hudson was mentioning as part of the drive up and the meditation, is like sometimes 1 second or 10 seconds or a minute or an hour or a year can feel kind of like the same if we really dig into the moment. In the present moment, that one breath in meditation can feel like an eternity. And that's a really nice thing to be able to do, especially if we're in a particularly nice moment. Let it stretch. And when you're in meditation, oftentimes you'll feel like this meditation was a half an hour, but it felt like 5 minutes. Or this was a really rough meditation. It was only 15 minutes, but it felt like 15 hours. It was like torture the entire time. In this way where we are able to really dig into the moment and just become completely absorbed in that sensation, it can feel not even just nice, but it can feel like we are truly being for the first time. And I had another quote from the same newsletter that came out today. This is a quote from somebody whose name I cannot pronounce. I'm going to say Sadhguru, on the miracles of daily life. Every moment, there are a million miracles happening around you. A flower blossoming, a bird tweeting, a bee humming, a raindrop falling, a snowflake wafting along the clear evening air. There is magic everywhere. If you learn how to live it, life is nothing short of a daily miracle. And this is the kind of thing that we'll recognize more through our meditation, through that kind of concerted effort to be present, through filling your life with more silence, which sounds kind of like a paradox, but filling your life with silence and really allowing yourself that clearing to experience the day, the moment, the breath is one of the best gifts that we can give ourselves. And that's kind of what meditation is, on some level, is practicing just the moment. Practice accepting in and fully experiencing it. And being in silence for an extended period of time can help us to stretch that out. So in a minute, we'll sit and meditate. But what I really encourage you to do is when we're done meditating, not to jump in the car and turn on the radio right away, to just kind of be with it, be with yourself in silence. And, whether it's walking to the car and that's how long you can extend it, or maybe the entire drive home or the entire walk home, try to extend it a little bit further. And meditation on its own is great. It's wonderful. I think it's the most important thing that you can do. And it's not enough. On its own, it is not enough. Meditation has its real power and its real ability to shape us and the world around us when we extend it into everyday life. Whether it's being aware of the daily miracles, or it is just, bringing it into this car ride home, which the car ride is a miracle. There's this Louis C.K. bit. He's sitting on an airplane and looking around, and everyone's like pissed off to be on an airplane. And he's like, we're soaring through the air at hundreds of miles an hour, like a mile above the earth. And this is a miracle. Like, it does not get any more miraculous than this. It's incredible. And we're all pissed off to be in this miracle of engineering. And there's a great part in The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. If you guys have read this book, it's really nice. It's the book that inspired me to do martial arts when I was like 17 years old. And the main kind of guru character in this book, his name is Socrates, is talking to Dan. Dan is the author, and it's like a fictionalized kind of journey through his understanding of philosophy and kind of awakening to a kind of a Zen kind of philosophy in life. And his teacher, Socrates, says to him, show me something that's just incredible. Show me the most amazing thing that you can do. And so Dan, who is a gymnast, like kind of gets stuff out of the way, and he like gets himself ready, and he does a backflip and he lands it. And it's like, that's incredible. I cannot do a backflip. And Socrates is like, that's pretty good. Watch this. And he walks into the bathroom. He's just in there for a couple minutes. And then the toilet flushes and he walks back out. And he's like, I took, water in and processed it through my body, and my kidneys like took the impurities out. And then I you know, without getting graphic, like released it from my body. And like, that's a real miracle. I mean, it's way more impressive than doing a backflip if you think about it. And each breath that we take is a miracle. I mean, our lungs, I don't even know how all this stuff works. We're taking in this air, we're kind of separating the electron from the oxygen, and it's fueling our bodies and our brains. Again, read about this online. I don't know how it works, but it's miraculous. There could be nothing more insanely beautiful and miraculous than each breath that we take. And so if you're struggling to pay attention to your breath in meditation, of course, set aside some time to be in silence and do all the things that we need to do, but just remind yourself of the miracle that is happening every single breath you take. It's incredible. Sit comfortably. So I'll go over some of the ideas in meditation. When you're sitting, you can sit cross-legged or you can sit on your knees. You do not want your knees to be pointing up too high. So if you don't have very flexible hips, I suggest sitting on your knees. And if you guys want to turn the cushions upright onto its side, you can sit a little bit more comfortably. But find a comfortable position. And if you need to shift during the meditation, try to do it quickly and quietly. The posture in meditation is super important, and especially if you're going to do a longer meditation. We're only going to do 15 minutes, which is going to seem long if you haven't done it before. But in that posture, super important to have your hands upturned at your hips. If they're sliding down, especially if you're sitting on your knees, this is going to cause you to slouch. If you are sitting cross-legged, your hands can rest on your knees as well, but I always do it on my hips. And this is going to help us to keep our shoulders and chest open and relaxed. If you are slouching, this is bad for your breathing. This is going to make you more likely to fall over. In a lot of meditation and internal practices, they talk about energy flow as well. And so the position of your spine is very important. If your spine is hunched, the energy flow, the breathing, the balance is all rough. So you roll your shoulders back and relax. You don't need to keep them forced back, but you do want your spine to be erect and slightly engaged so that you're not falling asleep or tipping over. Your chin is parallel to the ground, and close eyes. Your eyes are slightly upturned. Now, there are many ways of positioning the eyes in meditation as well, but this style of meditation, you're going to have your eyes closed and slightly raised up to the point between your eyebrows, which does not mean that you are crossing your eyes. If you start to have a headache in meditation, it's probably because your eyes are crossed. And getting the right position for your eyes can be kind of difficult sometimes. So one of the things you can do is just take your finger and touch the point just above the point between your eyebrows, kind of in the center of your forehead. And just by feeling that physical sensation, your eyes will start to naturally rise up. If that doesn't work for you, you can open your eyes and look at a spot that is above your own head off in the distance, and then close your eyes again and feel how your eyes are again slightly upturned but not crossed. From here, we'll start with a couple of breaths. We'll do a breathing exercise to help us wind our minds down into this meditation. So begin with all the breath out. Breathe in through the nose. Hold it for a few seconds at the top. And breathe out. Always breathe in through the nose. Then breathing out through the nose or the mouth. You want to breathe from your belly. So as you breathe in, feel your belly expanding. It's your diaphragm doing the breathing. And then as you breathe out, feel the belly contract again, pushing back in. Do a couple more deep breaths. can count the breaths, counting the seconds as you inhale and hold, count the seconds as you exhale. Last breath in, nice and deep. And now finish with a double exhalation. And now just let your breath move in by itself. And when your breath finishes, let it go out by itself. So you're not trying to manipulate the breath. And there's no judgment. You're just allowing yourself to feel the breath. When your mind wanders, gently bring it back to the breath. Again, there's no judgment. Having those errant thoughts is part of meditation, so you're not going to judge yourself for it. Just release the thought and return back to the breath. If you find that you're having a particularly hard time focusing, you can go back to counting your breaths. And then when you refocus, let that go again.